This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
On this week's programme, we hear about the legal and political ambiguities of forced migration in a fragmented Cyprus, looking at migration in the north of the island.
The situation is a mess. Some of the reasons for this are due to the unrecognized status of northern Cyprus. Others are really due to political malfeasance within the administration in northern Cyprus.
A leading human rights defender in Cyprus is awarded the Frontline Defenders Award.
We see all of these human rights violations occurring with great impunity. We see, for example, that nobody has been brought to justice over the bombing of the Kisa offices, and yet Doros is standing trial again, because as soon as brave human rights defenders stand out and defend the rights of others, there are baseless charges brought against them.
And we hear what motivates the winner of that award.
We belong to a great family of people, whatever they are, journalists, politicians, or other people that they wish, from their point of view, to contribute better for the society.
Cypriot Cyprus organised a discussion recently that featured my next guest on the programme. He is Emmanuel Achiri, co-founder of Voice Cyprus, that was a representative body for international students, and co-founder of Stop the War in Cameroon Coalition. He joins us now. You were talking, Emmanuel, I think generally about confronting the legal and political ambiguities of forced migration in a fragmented Cyprus. Now, I've done a lot of coverage of refugee and asylum seeker problems on the island. You have an expertise with the north of the island, because I think you studied there. And I think I'm right in saying that earlier this year, they declared you as persona non grata, and you can't go there anymore, is that right?
Yes, absolutely. I'm Rosie. Thanks first for having me on your podcast. Yes, I lived there for 8.5 years. I did my master's and I did my PhD there. And yes, I was declared persona non grata in March 2024. Officially, I was not told why, but unofficially, it was due to, my political activities. And of course, political activities here have to do with the advocacy work I was doing with Voice Cyprus for migrants and refugee rights, but also general political activity on human rights and collaboration, of course, with EU institutions to document abuses of human rights of migrants. And so, unofficially, I was told that this is the reason why. But of course, officially, they are refusing to give any reason as to why I am declared persona non grata.
It sounds like things north and south of the divide on the island are very similar to me, because I've covered a lot of stuff, as I said, with migration issues in the Republic of Cyprus. So let's talk a little bit about the situation in the north. And, okay, you haven't been there for 6 months or so, maybe longer, but I think you've probably still got contacts there, and it sounds like they don't have a very organised way of dealing with migration.
I still do have contacts there. I'm still in touch with friends and colleagues and, other people that I know that are involved with migrant rights advocacy and activism. And indeed, I think saying that there is no organized way is almost a subtle way of putting it. The situation is a mess. Some of the reasons for this are due to, the unrecognized status of northern Cyprus. Others are really due to political malfeasance within the administration in northern Cyprus. And other reasons, of course, also include the fact, European complicity as well, because we have to also understand that there are reasons why over the last 3, 4, 5 years especially, a lot of migrants asylum seekers or potential or would-be asylum seekers are using the Cyprus route, whether this is through the northern part of Cyprus or through the Republic of Cyprus. That also has to do with European externalization actions in the region as a result, and of course northern Cyprus and the Republic of Cyprus seen as an easier way of getting to Europe, or some people want to stay here. So the reasons are beyond just, the fact that there's political malfeasance in northern Cyprus. There's a plethora of reasons as to why. And just coming back to the issue of the status of the northern part of Cyprus, which is unrecognized, of course, this plays a very important role, because since it is unrecognized, and even though the authorities in the northern part of Cyprus, or northern Cyprus, depending on how you want to refer to it, claim to have willingly acceded to international human rights treaties, of course, including the 1951 Refugee Convention, the Civil and Political Rights Convention, the Economic and Social Rights Convention, and other human rights treaties, because it is unrecognized, it is not a formal party.
Well, I was going to ask you about the role of the UNHCR, because the High Commission for Refugees works all over the world, but I don't suppose because the North is unrecognised that it has an official role to play there.
The UNHCR does not have an official capacity in the North because it is unrecognized, and because it is unrecognized, UNHCR, technically speaking, cannot operate there. But it also depends on how one wants to look at this. If you want to apply a legal perspective, then would make the argument, of course, that since it is not a recognized state, then of course the UNHCR cannot operate there. But a legal analysis doesn't fully capture the realities on the ground. The reality is refugee rights are universal. They do not stop being universal because a territory is unrecognized or occupied or de facto state, no matter how you want to put it. And so the reality is refugees and asylum seekers who live in the north need refugee protection because these are universal human rights.
But they don't get it.
They do not get it because the northern part of Cyprus does not have a legal formalized structure to accept refugees.
Right, now let's talk about, if we may, the accusations in the south that the authorities in the north are actually encouraging people who are not legally resident in the north, or even students who've come legally but actually they came because they want to claim asylum. They're pushing them over the buffer zone.
Okay, before I answer that, I just want to take us back to the question of the UNHCR to also push back on the claim that the UNHCR does not have the capacity to work there. That is a political decision, because people who live there still deserve and need international protection. And if, according to the EU acquis, all of Cyprus, the northern part and the Republic is considered as the territorial Republic of Cyprus, then there can be political solutions to have the UNHCR actually be more involved. The current status quo is simply a political decision, and that's why I was saying a legal analysis is not sufficient. But coming back to your question of the Republic of Cyprus, now the Republic of Cyprus, or authorities in the Republic of Cyprus, say many things. The reality is there is zero evidence whatsoever that the authorities in the northern part of Cyprus actively encourage people to cross the buffer zones into the Republic of Cyprus. I lived there for 8.5 years. I've spoken to almost every official who works on this. I've spoken to migrants themselves. I was a migrant living there. I was a migrant rights activist. I was a leader of the international student community. And there is zero evidence whatsoever that the authorities in the northern part of Cyprus, or Turkey, as they also encourages, there is zero evidence of this. So this is more of a political accusation because the Republic of Cyprus shirks responsibility and doesn't want to do anything. But at the same time, we cannot deny that the buffer zone is porous. So the division, quote unquote, between the northern part and the Republic of Cyprus is porous. So that means people can easily cross the buffer zone to seek for asylum in the Republic of Cyprus.
And we've had cases of migrants going the other way as well. So, I mean, as you say, it's porous and people can make their own decisions to some degree. Let me come on quickly, if we may, to your talk about confronting the legal and political ambiguities. How did you get that message across? And who was in the audience?
The audience was different people. Of course, a lot of them are also people who work in the field of migration, specifically in Cyprus, whether as independent researchers or as political actors. And the reception, of course, is mixed. You have those who, agree with our analysis that a legal framework of looking at the political landscape in Cyprus. So of course the north and the south is insufficient, because at the end of the day you have asylum seekers in the north, or people, whether they are migrants or former students or refugees, who have a plausible claim to refugee status, who live in the northern part of Cyprus and do not have the possibility of seeking for asylum there because international refugee law is not applicable. You have people as well who are stuck in the buffer zone, although the buffer zone is part of the territory of the Republic of Cyprus, but they do not claim their responsibility to want to process the asylum claims there. You also, of course, have the UNHCR that, fix fakeness by providing certificates called persons of concern letters to asylum seekers in the northern part of Cyprus, and this is somehow supposed to prevent them from deportation in some cases, not always, and give them access to other social services, which is not always the case. So of course you have different political actors who in a sense are all performing in a sense. And of course, you can imagine that our analysis, our conclusion, basically that a legal analysis is not sufficient. We need a political analysis. And of course, we need the UNHCR to stop faking fakeness. Basically, you cannot provide documents which are not legal in a territory which you also do not recognize. And at the same time, the authorities in the north and the south cannot continuously use the Cyprus problem as an excuse for not providing refugee rights to people in need of protection. And of course, so you can imagine that, with these different political actors, the reception is different. You have those who completely disagree with us. And of course, you have those who somehow agree with us, but still do not see how they could actively engage in this process, although we have strong recommendations as to how this can happen. And of course, you have those who agree with us, and a lot of them themselves are either migrants or migrant rights activists or researchers who are also working on this topic. So
the bottom line seems to me that you need to have the political will, which is sadly lacking, I think, in Cyprus. And just before we finish, let me ask you about your own story. Now, I know a lot of people here don't think that Cameroon, which is, I believe, your homeland, has a problem. And yet the civil war there, as far as I know, has been going on for years. Is it still going on?
Absolutely. I will start first by saying I agree with you completely that there's a lack of a political will, but this is not just about the authorities in the north and south, it's also about the European Union. We know about the new pact on migration, which basically the Union is going to be promoting the same kind of practices that is happening. Yes, of course, this responsibility goes as well to the EU. And yes, I'm from Cameroon. I don't know whether I consider Cameroon as a homeland, because I think as a human rights defender, for me, my home is the struggle. So my home is Northern Cyprus as much as it is Cameroon, as much as it is the Republic of Cyprus, as much as it is Brussels, where I'm currently based. It's anywhere. But I was born in Cameroon, of course. And the conflict has been ongoing for a very long time now, since November 2016. And this is leading to displacement from Cameroon. But of course, it is not only the conflict, between, English-speaking so-called rebels and the administration. So I just really want to clarify, French-speaking dominated administration. So this is not a conflict between Anglophones and Francophones. This is more about a French-dominated or Francophone-dominated government and an English-speaking rebel or set of rebel groups.
It's post-colonial strife.
It is a post-colonial strife as well. That also includes local dynamics as well, which are very long-standing. But I also really just want to highlight that this is not the only reason why people are moving from Cameroon, because we have a lot of analysis where people say, well, if they're not coming from the English-speaking part of Cameroon, then they do not have a right to seek asylum. But the reality is that Cameroon finds itself in a very peculiar position in the Sahel region and the West and Central African region, where in the north of Cameroon you have Boko Haram, but you also have rebel groups from Chad and Niger. In the east of Cameroon, of course, you have displacement from the Central African Republic by herder communities, whereas in the eastern part of Cameroon, you have an agrarian community. And so this is also leading to clashes between these communities. In the northwest and southwest, of course, you have the Anglophone crisis, and you also have a political crisis by a regime that has been in power since 1982, which is also persecuting human rights activists, journalists, lawyers. And so there are various reasons why people are leaving Cameroon to seek for asylum. It's not just about the Anglophone crisis. And I always invite analysts or people working on this, you need to look at Cameroon from a holistic perspective and don't think that because they're English speaking, perhaps they have they have a claim, and if they are not, then they do not have a claim. It's a more complex and complicated situation than is currently portrayed in most of the media outside of Cameroon.
Well, I think that your studies included Cameroonians who were stuck in the buffer zone. Of course, we now have a whole load of Syrians and I think Afghans who are stuck in the buffer zone. So the problem isn't going away anytime soon. What do you hope that your research and your work will achieve? Will it persuade people that they need to look more holistically at the whole problem?
I mean, we hope that it will persuade people to look holistically at the whole problem. At least what we are offering is an analysis. So this is not just some discussion based on whims and caprices, but we are providing a very rigorous analysis which shows that this problem is not going to go away. There are dynamics in the region, but there are also dynamics as well in Cyprus and dynamics at the EU level, which would mean that people would continue using either the northern part of Cyprus as a transit route to the Republic of Cyprus, although the vast majority of asylum seekers actually stay in the northern part of Cyprus, even though they do not have a formalized system of seeking for asylum. But of course, as things are changing in the northern part of Cyprus, politically, economically, these people who already have claims for asylum would more than likely want to cross into the buffer zone to seek for asylum in a more formalized structure, which should be the case anyways. But of course, we also know that in the Republic of Cyprus, we have Syrians, because Cyprus had this started pushing Syrians back to Lebanon and to Syria, although now we know there was a European Court of Human Rights decision a couple of days ago against this. But we have had Syrians crossing back into the buffer zone and into the northern part because they did not want to get deported. And of course, we know that with the ongoing escalations in Lebanon, especially with the ongoing invasion of the IDF Israel in Lebanon, it's going to lead to displacement not only of Lebanese, but Syrians who have been living in Lebanon for years now. And of course, the displacement as well, as a result of the Gaza genocide, is also going to lead to a more convoluted situation in the Middle East. And so people are going to continue to move. And as the EU closes its borders, the externalization efforts, porous routes like Cyprus are going to become more attractive. And so this problem is not going anywhere.
No, I think we all know that. We've been talking to Emmanuel Achiri from originally Cameroon, now resident in Brussels, who presented that discussion on confronting the legal and political ambiguities of forced migration in a fragmented Cyprus. Emmanuel, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Rosie.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
The Frontline Defenders organisation was in Cyprus recently for the Human Rights Defenders at Risk Award for 2024. It went to our well-known friend Doros Polikarpou from Kisa, but I've asked from the Frontline Defenders, which is, I believe, an Irish organisation, I've asked Katrina Rice to join me and explain more about the work that they do. So, Katrina, this is global, I think, and Ireland has a very strong history of human rights defence.
Yes, indeed. Frontline Defenders was founded in Ireland in 2001 with the very specific mandate of looking at the security and protection for human rights defenders around the world who were courageously continuing with their struggles, their work, but were facing great personal risk in doing so. Mary Lawler, who is now the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights defenders, founded the organisation in Ireland, but we have a global mandate. And last year we supported defenders in 124 different countries. This year our Global Protection Grants programme has given almost 900 grants so far to defenders in 92 different countries. So really it's quite global in the reach.
It's also, I have a horrible feeling, more and more necessary. It does seem to me that over the past, particularly maybe 4 or 5 years, we hear more and more about far-right hatred, if you like, trying to gain a foothold everywhere.
Absolutely. I mean, human rights are under attack across the world. We're seeing more attacks against those people who are speaking out, but we're also seeing a huge rise in the number of cases, for example, in the European region, where a number of years back we may not have been working on so many cases, and this is what has led us to present the award this year to Doros Polikarpou for his work defending the rights of migrants, as we see the increase in attacks from, in particular, far-right groups, from governments who are getting in across the European region as well as the broader global spectrum, but who are really cracking down on human rights.
What would you say is the biggest threat to the work of human rights organisations? You mentioned governments, and it seems to me that if there is not the political will and the political courage to stand up for global human rights, then we're going down a very dark road.
Sadly, I think that's what we're seeing at the moment. Instead of seeing human rights defenders as people who can give a voice to the struggles of the citizens of different countries around the world, instead we see governments crack down. We see them seeing them as opponents and enemies rather than as people who are critical thinkers and can be change makers, voices of social change within communities to really raise attention to the violations that we're seeing.
I'm particularly concerned because, of course, Cyprus was found guilty in the European Court of Human Rights recently. It's something we discussed on the programme, and, of course, documented in the speeches when Doros received his award were things like the bomb at Kisa. This is really getting to the point where you wonder what happens about the rule of law if there isn't a government taking its responsibilities for the safety of all its citizens, and that includes, of course, human rights defenders who do sometimes unpopular work in the world we live in, but it's just something that surely should be up and front.
Absolutely, and we see all of these human rights violations occurring with great impunity. We see, for example, that nobody has been brought to justice over the bombing of the Kisa offices, and yet Doros is standing trial again, because as soon as brave human rights defenders stand out and defend the rights of others, there are baseless charges brought against them. They're unable to continue with their work because they're having to expend all of their energies in defending these cases that have been brought against them for all of the wrong reasons.
What's the next move for organisations like yours? I mean, is there anything you can do to try and change the dynamic, I guess, is what needs to happen?
Certainly Frontline Defenders is involved in a huge amount of advocacy around the protection of human rights and the protection of human rights defenders, we are trying to protect one to empower 1,000. We want the human rights defenders around the world to feel more secure, to be able to raise their voices and speak out against those violations without facing all of these different threats, death threats, legal cases, family members being attacked, homes being raided. So for Frontline Defenders, we will continue to work to support those defenders so that they have the voice and they can continue to speak out.
And one should just note that Cyprus itself, of course, after 1974, has been very vociferous about other people protecting the human rights of Cypriots. So it's a little bit embarrassing when we don't do it for others, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's where, we try to find champions around the world in governments who are good at speaking out about human rights violations, but they tend to do that about other countries and not look inwards at the violations that continue to occur in all of the countries around the world. That's why we have human rights defenders operating in so many countries, because really nobody is showing a perfect face when it comes to human rights.
Unfortunately, that's true. We've been talking to Katrina Rice from the Frontline Defenders organisation in Ireland. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
After the award ceremony, I asked Doros Polikarpou what the award meant to him.
Well, when you live in a society and you try hard to contribute for the improvement of this society, and the feedback you get most of the time is that you work against your society. You do it for whatever, for money, you're accused for so many things. We don't expect the people to say, bravo, how great you are, human rights activists or whatever. But I think just to recognize that we belong to a great family of people, whatever they are, journalists, politicians, or other people that they wish, from their point of view, to contribute better for the society. So when you live in a country where you are in danger, permanently you get threats in social media, in your inbox. Recently I got a message from somebody who said, if I don't send him this and this amount of money, he will pass from my house before he will go to jail. You can imagine, I reported this to the police. I don't even have feedback what the police did until now.
Well, they didn't do much about the bomb on the premises of
exactly.
your organisation, did they?
Exactly. And I think when you have this environment, this is like something wonderful happened to you. We should have a world where we appreciate human rights and nobody is in risk. We cannot celebrate people because they are in risk. But you can imagine what we did today. We celebrate and we are happy. I'm happy that at least an international organization and the Special Rapporteur of the UN pays attention to the difficulties we face in doing our work that, in my opinion, and this is what officially also the government says and everybody and the EU, we contribute for the democracy in this society and we are essential part of this democratic process of this society. This is what they sign when they go to the Brussels and they decide together to create a viable and thriving civic space. But when they come home, they forget what they sign. And they remember that we are troublemakers, we are, unfortunately, very often we hear this, traitors, we work for the enemies of this nation, society instead of the opposite. So this is, within this very difficult environment, I think you feel really very strong acknowledgement and you feel that it's important that at least some part of this world, they understand that what you do is positive, is something for the people that you believe for whatever reason. I mean, how many volunteers, how many people we have that they start to do this work. When you start to do this work, you never think I want to become an activist. You start because you believe that social movements are important in the society, whether it's for environment, for human rights, for migrant rights, for refugee rights, I used to work 10 years for protecting or supporting victims of domestic violence as well. So for some reasons, there are so many people in this world that they decide to dedicate part of their time, life, energy to support other people. We want to do it in peace, not under threat, and the state should take its responsibility and make sure that not the state actors nor any para-state actors have the right to threat us for what we do.
No, it would just be nice, wouldn't it, if some areas of the state actually acknowledged, shall we say, that you do contribute to a better society, and it's actually the opposite that's happening in Cyprus, sadly, at the moment.
They do it behind doors. They do it in private conversation with us. They do it when we go together to EU. But when they speak to you, to the media, and when they speak in public, they don't forget to identify us with those they consider as the big threat of this society.
Well, it would be refreshing, I guess, Thoros, if the government organisations here acknowledged the contribution that organisations like KISA make to society, rather than coming out, as they so often do, and knocking the work that you do. Congratulations on being awarded the 2024 award from the Frontline Defenders for the work you do for human rights. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. And it's symbolic for so many other people that they do this work in a similar conditions in some other parts of the world, in a very, very much more difficult conditions. Imagine how activists for human rights right now work in the occupied territories of Palestine or in Lebanon. You can imagine that these people, they decided, in order to continue their work, that at any moment they are going to be killed by the occupation army and eliminated, in brackets, within this part of the genocide that right now the Israeli government is doing in the occupied areas for Palestine. So it's important what we do, but we should not forget that in some other parts, conditions are uncomparable. Still, there are people that they find the courage to stand up and say, we are going to defend dignity in this world, irrespective of the fear, irrespective of the dangers we go through. This is very important, and this is what we need to acknowledge and appreciate as well.
Doros Polikarpou from KISA, well-deserved awardee of the Frontline Defenders Award for 2024. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.